Hey, what's up, everybody? I want to welcome you to another episode of the Dreamerspro Daily Recap, where we give you a recap of all of the hot topics that we covered that day. You can catch them in their long format and also catch it fully streaming for free on Apple Podcasts. What did I say? I heard it when I was asleep that Chris Broussard was rolling with them dudes deep. Shout out to the Nas song Ether. But anyway. So this weekend, I took a break with my family, just kind of step away, just kind of take a break and celebrate my birthday and do some other things, right? But in the midst of that happening, a bit of news broke, and I think it was on Friday. And people started messaging me about this news on Instagram. Again, if you're not following me on Instagram, my handle is CTABANZ. If you're not following the channel's handle is the same as the channel on Instagram, Dreamerspro. And they were like, yo, did you see the story? Did you hear what Chris Broussard said? Did you hear what Chris Broussard said? And I'm sitting there like, what did Chris Broussard say? Like, what news did he make now, right? Because we had produced some shows that were centered on a Tom Haberstroh article, a 6,000 word book or whatever it is, dissertation, I don't know, thesis, whatever the hell you want to call it, about Michael Jordan's 1988 Defensive Player of the Year award. So we did a show on that. We did multiple shows on that, kind of refuting some of the points that he brought up. But then apparently what had happened was they invited him on Fox Sports Radio, where Chris Broussard also does work with Rob Parker. And essentially during that audio or that video, Chris Broussard, as he's introducing, Haberstroh, he then says, you know, how much did Rich Paul and these guys, what did Rich Paul and these guys and Klutch Sports promise you for basically going out there and putting out this hit piece on Michael Jordan? But he said it in a joking way. But that's not the part that stood out to me and a lot of people. The part that surprised a lot of us was that Chris Broussard then goes on to say, you know, I'm just playing and I'm joking with them. And by the way, I'm represented by Klutch Sports. And I'm like, damn, what? They got Chris Broussard too? So what we want to do now is we want to play exactly what Chris Broussard had to say about his affiliation with Klutch Sports, and then we're going to come back and react to the sound of that. Take a listen to Chris Broussard here.
Our next guest writes for Yahoo Sports, and also you can check him out on Substack, TomTheFinder.com. We welcome in Tom Haberstroh. Tom, how are you?
Brew, what's going on, buddy?
We are great. We got Ephraim Salaam in for Rob Parker. And, you know, you and I go way back, colleagues back at ESPN. You do fantastic stuff. And we were just talking about your story on how Michael Jordan's defensive stats, steals and blocks, were doctored, if you will, in home games in 1988. First question. What did Rich Paul and Klutch promise you to write that article?
Now we getting to the bottom of it.
Rich is my man. I'm actually represented by Klutch, so Rich is my man. I'm just playing with you. But you know, this is the LeBron is the GOAT camp is putting your article in frames and putting it on their wall. I'll tell you that.
Well, it is something that I was cognizant of as I was reporting, is that LeBron James has been talking pretty much every year of his career about how he's never won Defensive Player of the Year, and he's really wanted to. And he took issue with Marc Gasol winning Defensive Player of the Year and finishing in the second team all defense. And it's something he's talked about on the shop. And I knew that Michael Jordan's Defensive Player of the Year award, you know, just covering the league for as long as I have, it's one of the most consequential, if not the most consequential, Defensive Player of the Year awards in NBA history because it sets him apart. It is his crown jewel in a sense compared to Magic, compared to Kareem, compared to LeBron. They don't have that on their resume.
So you heard what Chris Broussard had to say. You know, a part of me is very disappointed. What I'm disappointed about is not the fact that Chris Broussard is represented by Klutch Sports, because Chris Broussard can be represented by whoever the hell he deems worthy of representing him. That's not the point. What is disappointing is that with every passing day and as the weeks go by, I'm beginning to realize that almost everybody, or a good amount of the big voices in sports media that discuss the NBA, all of them are affiliated with Klutch Sports in some shape, form, or fashion. That is disappointing to me. It is very, very disappointing. And the reason I say it's disappointing because it looks as if these guys are working together to create a climate out there that constantly props up LeBron James while taking bleeps on other players. LeBron and his camp are like, LeBron is the only guy that you have to, in order for him to be elevated, you have to bring somebody down. That's exactly what that hit piece was by Tom Haberstroh. They couldn't just, praise LeBron. They couldn't do that. In order for him to be praised, they had to now try to taint Jordan's career. And in this case, they were trying to question his Defensive Player of the Year award. Those two things had to go in tandem. So it would taint the way you viewed one particular athlete and then enhance the way you view another, in this case, LeBron James. And this is a pattern that has been taking place for years in sports media. Here's what's interesting with Chris Broussard saying that, and I don't know Chris Broussard. I think we sent Chris Broussard a message I think we invited him on our show. It was sometime last year. I don't even think he saw the message. I don't know. We messaged him on through Instagram on his our Dreamerspro account. I don't know if he saw it, but anyway, here's what's interesting about Chris Broussard. Even though Chris Broussard is represented by Klutch Sports, Chris has been a person that is known in the sports media space to put forth some of the greatest Michael Jordan GOAT arguments I've ever heard. Especially when he pushes back on Nick Wright. Because Nick Wright just be up there losing his damn mind. He be up there just twerking it up all over the place, knocking over drinks. Just basically disturbing the peace, pouring honey all over him. Once Nick gets on a roll, you can't stop him. You just need to get out of his way because he's going to twerk, right? And Chris has been a voice on that show that's been pushing back on him whenever it comes with the Jordan slander. Because I think, and I don't know Chris Broussard, but I think Chris Broussard understands one thing. That even though he likes LeBron, even though he said he's known LeBron for years, even though he has him as the second greatest player of all time, he also knows he can't lie to himself. He also knows he can't lie to himself. So here's what I think about this information. This is how I'm interpreting it. I think Chris Broussard being represented by Klutch Sports means the following. I think that Chris Broussard genuinely likes LeBron James as a basketball player and as a person. I think he thinks LeBron is a pretty good dude. And I know this from his days back on Cold Pizza and First Take when he was defending him when Skip Bayless used to roast LeBron James. He always would defend him. But I think Chris also knows that, look, for as much as I like LeBron, I think Chris respects Jordan's legacy and his accomplishments more than he likes LeBron. And I think that Chris Broussard has been able to draw the distinction that most people who sit up there and twerk it up all over the internet for LeBron can't. Meaning, these supporters like the Shannon Sharp, the Nick Wrights in the world, they allow the love that they have for LeBron to basically cloud their judgment, and then they just go out there and say crazy things, like LeBron is better than Michael. That's crazy talk. When Shannon Sharp is cuckoo talk, it's ludicrous behavior. These are people that saying LeBron is better than Michael Jordan is a fringe opinion. You're in the fringe when you say something like that. So Chris Broussard has still been able to maintain that, but now I understand because there are a lot of times when LeBron has his antics and Chris Broussard doesn't push back there are a lot of times when Nick Wright is up there twerking it up and he doesn't really, throw some water on him to light that fire off, to turn that fire off because Nick is just gyrating all over the table. And there are times he kind of lets LeBron go. But there are also times where I got to say this, though, to be fair. I've seen Chris Broussard say things about LeBron that other NBA fans feel that a Nick Wright and these guys will never say. And I'll give you an example before we close. For instance, when he says, why is it always got to be that LeBron needs some help? he'll say that the knock around, one of the knocks on LeBron is that everywhere he goes is always the coach's fault and he always needs some help. Why does he always need some help? Nick Wright would never point something like that out. Shannon Sharp would never point something like that out. But Chris did. So I got to give him credit there. But those are my thoughts. Just sad, man. Klutch Sports, they just going for everybody. We recently produced a show about, let me say, 4 to 5 days ago. And that show was centered on some comments that former ESPN analyst, former NBA coach, Jeff Van Gundy had to make about what it was like, the process of being let go and being fired by ESPN when they were having their downsizing, when they let go of Max Kellerman, Keyshawn Johnson, Mark Jackson, his partner, and all of that. And essentially what happened was Mark Jackson, who's on Cameron and Mace's show, come talk to me, invited Jeff Van Gundy on. And during their sit down, he essentially asked Jeff Van Gundy to describe what that process was like of being fired. Right? Because apparently it was a very difficult one and he had a very difficult situation. So what we want to do is just a quick refresher. I want to quickly play what Jeff Van Gundy had to say on Cam and Mace's show. Come talk to me about what it was like being let go by ESPN, and we'll come back and continue on the show. Take a listen to him here. So you heard what he had to say. So what happened? This afternoon, we're just going through looking for some content, and apparently there was a story that took place on Dan Le Batard's show where Stan Van Gundy, who's Jeff Van Gundy's brother, where he had gone on this show to essentially talk about a bunch of different things. And Dan Le Batard then essentially asked him, from your vantage point, what was that situation like when ESPN fired and essentially blindsided Jeff Van Gundy during when they were, last year when they were downsizing? And if you know anything about Stan Van Gundy, he doesn't bite his tongue whatsoever. He basically said that they absolutely effed him over. And I'm sitting there like, damn. And they were like, well, do you think your brother going to feel a type of way for you saying this? He's like, yeah, but I'm just going to basically call it down the line because that's exactly what the hell happened. And that's exactly what everybody realized happened as well. So what we want to do now is I want you guys to take a listen to what Stan Van Gundy had to say on Dan Le Batard's show. And then we're going to come back and continue on the show. Take a listen to this here.
Your brother was let go by ESPN. He was very classy about it, quiet. I don't think he had anything to say about it. Understands that it's a business, but I understood at ESPN that it was a business too, and it didn't make it hurt less when I was caught off guard by that. What do you say to him in that spot when he leaves ESPN? Do you have anything to give him solace?
Well, I don't know that I could give him solace, and he was hurt by it. I mean, he'd worked for them for 17 years, and it wasn't even just the fact that they made the move. I mean, they him. I mean, the timing was awful. They waited until basically the NBA market in terms of coaching jobs, assistants jobs, front office jobs was already gone by to make the move, and then they, delayed on a buyout that would free him to work for people. I mean, after 17 years of being in arguably, I don't even know if it's arguably, the best, game broadcast booth in the business in basketball, and being the kind of person he is, ESPN on him. And so all I could do was basically tell him that that's how I saw the situation, and I felt awful for him. Listen, you're in this business and you're the same. I mean, this stuff happens in the business. We've all been through it. We've been fired and everything else, but there's ways to do it and ways not to do it. I mean, I've been fired 4 times as a coach, and, the one in Detroit, the guy handled it great. I mean, and so I feel a lot differently about him than I do about the other 3. And I thought ESPN was absolutely miserable to him after what he had given them for 17 years.
I'm thinking he would advise you not to say any of that.
Oh, yeah. He would be upset. When he finds out that I said it, he'll be upset, and that's okay. I mean, it was like the other day, Jose Pineda, who the Spanish broadcaster for the Miami Heat, he said to Brian Anderson before the game, he said, hey, when you guys say the Heat are undermanned, he said, Eric doesn't want you to say that. He doesn't like it if you say that. And I'm thinking like, okay, I love Eric, but they're still undermanned and we're still going to say it. So, yeah, my brother wouldn't be happy if I was saying this, but it's what happened. And that's what I'm going to say. And you know what? I don't think anybody who knows the situation would disagree with me at all.
So you heard what Stan Van Gundy had to say. I had never thought about it in that way until he described it, especially in terms of the time of the firing. I think that what Stan Van Gundy was essentially saying was maybe Jeff Van Gundy had no idea he was being fired. Maybe he would appreciate it if he had a heads up. And that's why he was mentioning the time in which they did it, where all the head coaching jobs were filled, where all the assistant jobs were filled. And now it makes sense when I go back and listen to what Jeff Van Gundy had to say about the Boston Celtics essentially stepping in and extending a lifeline. That to me would indicate that he had no idea that it was coming. Now, if you look at some other people that were fired during that downsizing, different people had different situations. If you look at Keyshawn Johnson, for example, he was able to land on his feet and immediately he became the partner for Skip Bayless on Undisputed. Max Kellerman, we haven't heard from him. We don't know what's going to happen. Marcellus Wiley has mentioned it on our show that he believes Max Kellerman is going to make a return to sports media probably at the end of this year. We have to wait and see. I don't know. But in the looking at the situation and what Stan Van Gundy had to say, that's exactly what you would expect a brother to say, right? He would first of all support his brother and say that, hey, look, when they did that, they put him in a very difficult situation, and I'm sure it was the case. You heard what some of the personal challenges that he went through, and I think that ESPN's NBA Finals team, their coverage overall suffered. It really did. ESPN has been heavily criticized over their coverage of this last NBA Finals, where it was just basically them spamming ads at their consumers, where during their halftime show, they would only get about a minute and a half, 2 minutes and a half worth of basketball analysis in a halftime show, and then immediately cut to a whole bunch of commercials. And then if you look at the cast that they have covering the finals with Doris Burke, JJ Redick, and Mike Breen, a lot of people were like, yeah, they're okay, they're all right, but they preferred Mark Jackson and Jeff Van Gundy. And I did too, if I'm just being funky. Like, they were a really, really great trio. Now, they kept Mike Breen, obviously, because they need him. But it was a mistake, them letting him go. But at the same time, as Stephen A. Smith has said in the past, that the company had the downside. They had the cord cut. And he said that no one should be surprised because more of this is most likely going to take place in the future. So we officially got the word that JJ Redick has been hired as the Lakers head coach. We had done a live about 2 to 3 days before it happened, where we basically said, hey, listen, people are saying that some pretty reputable sources are saying that he's going to get the job, right? And then 2 or 3 days later, they ended up making their decision public. So they hired JJ Redick. I think he has a 4-year deal worth $32 million. So the Lakers ended up saving money in the process because they didn't have to pay Dan Hurley that money, which goes to show you that that's the guy that they really wanted. So now with JJ Redick being the next head coach, it then brings up the next batch of questions, which is, what kind of coach is he going to be? Who's he going to prioritize? Is he going to prioritize, the team, players like Anthony Davis and others, or is he going to prioritize his buddy LeBron, who he actually has a show with? And now we got to ask the question: what happens to that show? Does it continue or does it get canceled? I think the show gets canceled because I don't know how you're going to be the head coach of the Lakers and then doing a show, and especially if the Lakers don't do well, people like you got time to do a show, you ain't got time to focus on it. So I think that show is going to be at least put on hold for now, right? So I came across a segment today from ESPN First. I think it happened on Friday, and the panel featured Kendrick Perkins and Udonis Haslem. And essentially what they were talking and what they were discussing was, who should JJ Redick prioritize in terms of relationships? Should he prioritize Anthony Davis or should he prioritize LeBron James? And if you guys know anything about what's been happening between Kendrick Perkins and LeBron James, Kendrick Perkins essentially got fed up with LeBron. He got fed up of his antics. He had been calling him out on Twitter, calling him out from time to time. The last one was when he made some comments about Kyrie Irving, talking about he missed having him as a teammate when he tried to get him traded twice for Paul George and Chris Paul. And then now he talking about, he was like, stop trying to steal somebody's shine. And then LeBron James unfollowed him. So when it came time for, so now you know Kendrick Perkins is going to say what he really believes. I don't know why he didn't do that in the first place. But when it came time for Kendrick Perkins to essentially answer the question of who they prioritize, he totally shut down the idea of JJ Redick prioritizing LeBron James over Anthony Davis. So those are the comments that we want to focus on today. So what we want to do now is want to play exactly what Kendrick Perkins had to say on ESPN First Take, and then want to come back and react to his comments. Take a listen to Kendrick Perkins here.
Here's the thing, right? When it comes to the Lakers and JJ Redick, this is all about Anthony Davis. This is all about Anthony Davis. I know we just played the sound bite of me yesterday, but we did that. That was off of NBA Today. UD was on set with me. As soon as we started, they announced the breaking news right when we were on the show. And right after they announced that, we went into conversation, and I don't remember if it was Ramona Shelburne or Dave McMenamin, but one of them had talked about how Anthony Davis is pushing to get Rondo on the bench. And the first thing came to my mind is, damn, why? Right? We know that they won a championship together. We know Rondo is one of the best basketball minds to ever play the game of basketball. We get all that. But what I took from it is AD is like, hey, Bron, you got your guy in JJ Redick. I need my guy in Rajon Rondo on the bench, a guy that I could fully trust. Again, it's about trust. It's about gaining their respect. I heard UD talk about this 3 weeks ago, or maybe 4 weeks, about a month ago, when he was talking about, if JJ Redick get hired, how guys are going to have that thought in the back of their head. Can we trust this? Is it coming from JJ or is it coming from Bron? This is a real thing. No matter how we want to sugarcoat it, no matter how we don't want to address it, it is a real thing because they had a podcast together and guys in their locker room know how close they are now. And that matters. So you gotta, if you're JJ, you gotta establish a relationship with the most important player on this team, and that's Anthony Davis. You gotta get that understood.
So you heard what Kendrick Perkins, what he had to say there. I think he's telling the truth. And I think what he said was sensible. You need to prioritize Anthony Davis because he's the star that's going to be leading this franchise into the future. He's the one that the Lakers hitched their wagon to, right? They decided that he was going to be the successor to LeBron. But what does that really mean by prioritizing Anthony Davis? Here's what I think of when I say prioritizing Anthony Davis. An example of that could be ensuring that he's the number one shot taker on the team. That would help. That would certainly help. Ensuring that Anthony Davis is always in the right mindset in terms of being on attack mode. Ensuring that LeBron James is a complimentary star to Anthony Davis instead of a co-star. Some people say, well, that's outlandish. That's the bloody truth. If you look at the Lakers in round one against the Denver Nuggets, Anthony Davis was the Lakers' best player. It wasn't even close. All of the majority of the offense should be going through him. If AD takes 20 shots a game, LeBron should be somewhere around 13. And LeBron should now be more of a facilitator trying to get other guys involved. It'd be difficult because LeBron stat pads. So he wants to get his numbers. If JJ Redick emphasizes Anthony Davis in the way that they're talking about, you will see Anthony Davis become the focal point of that offense, where it's running through him, where you don't have points and stretches in the game where AD doesn't even touch the ball when he's the hottest hand, like what we saw in the playoffs last year, when I think he had like 20-something points in the first half. I don't remember what the hell he had. He could have finished that game with 50 and said he didn't. You can't have situations like that, and it's becoming upon the coach to communicate that to his players that, listen, this guy needs to get the ball, and also get in Anthony Davis's ear, like, demand the damn ball as well. That's what it means to me. Not just, hey, AD, what do you think about? No, that's not what it needs to translate on the court. This is how I'm interpreting this particular situation there. LeBron has had his time in the sun. There's nothing new that LeBron is going to do that's going to impress anyone in terms of what there's nothing new unless he goes out there and wins a championship or something like that. He's already scored over 40,000 points. So he's already got that feather in his hat. So to me, that's what I interpret. Excuse me. That's how I interpret them saying, or Kendrick Perkins saying, they need to prioritize Anthony Davis. But that's just how I view it. So what I want to know from you, the audience, number one, who does JJ Redick need to prioritize? Does it need to be Anthony Davis, or does it need to be LeBron James? And number two, actually, and number three, let me just throw this point out there as well. JJ also has to show the willingness to be able to hold LeBron James accountable in front of his teammates. Because you will lose your locker room rather quickly if you're busy holding all the other players accountable and you're not holding LeBron. You can't tell so-and-so player, why didn't you get back on defense when LeBron is not playing D? That's just not going to work. And the players may not feel comfortable to say it, but they will definitely be watching to see if the coach does. And if they see that the coach is afraid to call out his stars, you're going to lose those guys. And then we're going to be up here a year and a half from now. JJ Redick has lost the voice in the locker room. What do y'all think we should do? Do the Lakers need to fire JJ? We're going to be right back where we started.